Welcome to The Real Thomas Jefferson, episode 21. And today we'll be speaking about Thomas Jefferson peeing to husbandry. But first, I'd like to introduce our guest, Dr. Holowchak.
Yeah, I'm just coming in from the farm. I got my hoe with me. I always wanted to have a hoe. That's a bad joke.
Oh my goodness.
We'll get censored for that because it's so sexist.
Oh, Farmer Holowchak, that's what I'm going to call you.
It's, by the way, it's not farmer, it's colonel, by the way, as of last time, since I have a garden and I lived in the South for 8 years, I think I deserve to be called colonel. So it's Colonel Holowchak.
Oh, like Colonel Sanders.
Like Colonel Sanders chicken. Forget the doctor. I don't care about the doctor anymore. I want to be colonel.
Oh my goodness. Well,
I'm working. I'm glad you asked. I have like 8 apple trees that I'm growing from seed. I have my oregano growing. I have tomatoes coming in, beets, onions, carrots for the main things because that's what I eat mostly. And rose bushes, but limes and a bunch of other stuff growing. So I do grow a lot of stuff. So I'm kind of excited about doing Thomas Jefferson farming and with my hoe and my dog. Come on, Debbie.
Finish Where did you get the hoe? Oh, come on. No hoes around the dogs. It's not safe to have a hoe around a dog.
Jeffy's ready.
Jeffy. Oh, hi, Jeffy.
All right. Are we doing something today?
Yes. Oh, yeah, I think we are. Farmer Holowchak. As we glide through the spring, Colonel Holowchak. As we glide through the spring and ready for a lovely summer, today we're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson and farming. He often extolled the many virtues of farming and raised the life of a husbandman as an ideal for all Americans. Perhaps even all persons. So, and I'm very curious. I have some questions about that today that I'm hoping you can answer. We'll talk about his thoughts and many arguments on the benefits of farming. But first, a word on the aim of this show, the real Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, not the fake Thomas Jefferson. We're talking about the real. We're really I like the show because we're getting to know him not only as the politician that we know of who wrote the Declaration of Independence, but who he was and everything else about him. There was so much, there were many facets to Thomas Jefferson. He was not a simple man. So since publication of Merrill D. Peterson's groundbreaking manuscript, The Jefferson Image in the American Mind, nearly all Jeffersonian biographers take it upon themselves to write of Jefferson's protean nature or Janus-facedness. When Jefferson says most often cannot be understood literally, his prose must then be deconstructed, and so intuitiveness and knack are needed in preference to logical acumen. One scholar who spent a career writing on Jefferson said that Jefferson simply cannot be known. Oh, well, I have to disagree.
It's Peter Onoff. He is omniscient.
Oh, well, I will have to disagree.
He knows everything.
I feel like I know him very, very well, probably better than many other people I know in real life. It is commonplace to call the man a contradiction, as if a person can have the property of a necessarily false sentence. This show, The Real Thomas Jefferson, aims to dispel that myth. Jefferson can be known, and logic, non-intuitive, and discretionary deconstruction is the method. So I can't wait to hear more about Thomas Jefferson and farming. I'm Donna and this is The Real Thomas Jefferson, episode 21.
Yeah, the weather is right for it, so I thought, farming. I love to grow things myself. Thomas did as well. We'll see just what kind of farmer he was, what kind of husbandman.
Well, I thought it was very interesting when you brought up doing this topic, because I was just reading something about that was written by the CEO of the National Constitution Center, and he was writing something about Jefferson and the pursuit of happiness. And what the founders actually meant by happiness was the pursuit of virtue. Not happiness as we know it today, as the word means to us today, and what they meant at that time. So it's funny.
That takes you way back to ancient virtue ethics thinking, to Aristotle, Plato, Seneca, and the people that he read, the virtue ethics theorists. And that's a complicated issue as well. But I think that's right, that happiness was more for Aristotle, was more than just virtue. But he's talking about, I think that's right. So you can actually bring that point back up as we go on, because we're going to get back to that. We're going to get back.
So I love learning about anything to do with Cicero or stuff. I really hope that we can even add a third show to our.
Here's my a little piece of rose root. Dug up a ill-placed rose bush in my back. I'll tie this into Tom Jefferson somehow. Ill-placed rose bush in my backyard. It was overgrown, and right next to the driveway, I dug that out. I didn't get all the roots, and there was like 3 pieces of root still there, one of which was growing a new plant. So I'll put this in the ground and start a new rose bush at some point.
Oh, rose bush, and we can talk about philosophers.
We can talk about philosophers.
I know. I want to talk about philosophers. That's your specialty too. So the first thing I want to talk about, you mentioned to me in personal conversation that your first published paper was about Thomas Jefferson, the agrarian. Is there any particular reason for that topic?
I don't know. You have to start somewhere. It was a
question number 2.
It was a solid essay, and I remember one scholar's my first published essay, and it was solid. It wasn't earth-shattering, and you got to start somewhere. I remember one scholar reading it said, "Oh, Holowchak, that really was a sort of mediocre piece." I said, "Well, it's all right. You got to start somewhere." And the test of writing good stuff. Stuff is a very technical term, in German Stoff, is that you read it many years later and you say, you haven't changed your mind on any of it. That's hard to do. I mean, because normally most of us, when we publish early on, we're a little bit rash. We want to get a publication, so we publish on something without really having studied it as thoroughly as we needed to study. It's impossible to be thorough when you write your first paper. But anyway, most of the stuff I read in that, I wrote in there, I still agree with just about everything I've written in that paper. And it was somewhat mediocre to decent, simply because of my lack of knowledge of Jefferson and, going into a new area for the first time. But yeah, I like farming a lot. It was just very easy to write about Jefferson the farmer, to be intoxicated or enticed to do that. So the reason is probably because I enjoy farming, and I know Jefferson was a farmer. At least he wore the hat of a farmer sometimes.
Your hobbies in common. Well, it's nice to know that he was interested. Everything wasn't like a commercialized or manufacturing. It wasn't about money. His decisions weren't based on what's going to make him the most money. It's what's best for people. What was
like anybody else, as a farmer, as a planter, he wanted to make the plantation viable and solvent, and he wanted to make a profit. Of course, think otherwise, you'd be a fool. But his whole thing, it wasn't just about making money and maximizing money. You can do that by screwing other people. But when he went to Europe, he brought back merino sheep for other people to use. He brought back all sorts of, he brought Piedmont rice, and he brought other sorts of plants back to be, hopefully olive trees. He brought them back for South Carolina and so forth. They didn't work out, but, he was a generous person, as we talked about before. He was interested in farming. He was interested in improving the agriculture of colonial America, not just his own place, not just Virginia. I can't hear a word you're saying right
I know I mute that so and background noise doesn't interfere with the recording. So I want to know, why did Thomas Jefferson think that America should be predominantly a nation of farmers?
Well, he was attracted to the ideal of the husbandman because we had plenty of land for one. In America, there's plenty of land, and much of it was uncultivated. See, predominantly one of farmers. And I'm going to have to go to query 19 of his notes on Virginia in a bit. But the long and the short of it, I mean, on the third question, I'll go to query 19. But for one, he thought much of the life of a farmer for reasons I shall enumerate shortly, not right here. And he wanted America to be special. He also thought manufacture was sterile. Many of the things that people manufactured were needless gewgaws outside of the things that people needed for manufacture that were important things like plows for farmers and hoes, like my hoe, the one I brought in, and other things. There are things that people really needed to be manufactured. Clothing, things like that, shoes. But outside of that, much of what has been was manufactured and actually imported in the United States from England, for example, was needless gewgaws, stuff that was just, trinkets, trifles, and silly little things that people want because they want them, though they don't really feel any sort of need. So we're going to talk about the virtues of farming. And when I say virtues, you mentioned virtue in your introduction. I mean virtue in the literal sense of virtue, not virtues as the benefits, but virtues as, farmers, virtuous people are attracted to farming, and farming makes you virtuous. So
I can see having that connection to our creator.
Well, he doesn't use that argument, but you could make that argument. It's just, God did create the earth for him, and the earth is, there's something in Stoic philosophy called sequi natura, follow nature, right? Consecutive comes from sequi, to follow. Follow nature. Sequi is the imperative. God follow. And Jefferson believed in that. In other words, if you want to do something, if you wanted to fly as a human being, look at animals that fly. What do? If you want a healthy garden in Virginia, look at the plants that thrive in Virginia by nature, that humans don't grow. So you're not forcing anything. So there was that thing, this whole notion of sequi naturam in Latin, follow nature.
And doesn't he? I know in learning about his feeling on this, being connected to the earth made that investment in your living space, caring and tending to the earth, and having a farm, having your farm connected you and made you more invested to your space.
Yeah, I'm going to get into that with the third question that you asked. And so, ask the third question. I'm going to read from query 19. Okay,
so Thomas Jefferson mentions the sacrosanctity of the life of a husbandman. What are some of his arguments, and are they cogent?
Yeah, in his 23 queries of notes on the state of Virginia, I have the Peden edition, 1954. Mine is falling apart a little bit, but that's a sign that it's been used. He's got a 2-page query here.
Oh, you can't see it because the background. The background.
Somehow it comes up sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's 2 pages, and right there.
There you go.
And for a second, and it's called Manufacturers. And the question was, what sort of things are manufactured in Virginia? Um, he writes, and I'll read this most of the query. The political economists of Europe have established it as a principle that every state should endeavor to manufacture for itself. Now, that's self-sufficiency. If you have things that you need from that are manufactured, do it yourself. Jefferson was a do-it-yourself. Is that a Lowe's or Home Depot where they say do-it-yourself? I don't know.
I don't know. He's MacGyver, I'm thinking of.
It's not MacGyver.
But he'd like us all to be MacGyvers.
I don't know. And this principle, like many others, we transfer to America without calculating. And this is another principle he introduces. The difference of circumstance, which should often produce a different result. What's the circumstance of which he's speaking? The circumstance is the abundancy of land, untapped land, uncultivated land that they don't have in Europe. In Europe, the lands are either cultivated, they're farmed, in other words, fully farmed, or locked up against the cultivator. Manufacture must therefore be resorted to of necessity, not of choice, to support the surplus of their people. They have a lot of people. To be able to feed them, to be able to get the economy thriving, they need manufacture because all the land that's arable is already locked up. And when he's in France, he notices how the wealthy people own acres and acres and acres of land that's really not being used. And they use it for things like when people come over, let's go on a fox hunt. And Jefferson laments, that this land is being wasted when you have plenty of poor people who could be using that land and having small farms and things like that. So it's wasted. But in America, we have an immensity of land courting the industry of the husbandmen. It is best then that all our citizens should be employed in its improvement, or that one half should be called off from that exercise of manufacturers and handicraft arts for the other. He's asking a question here. Should all of us be involved in farming, or should half be involved in farming and half be involved in manufacture? And he's going to answer that question. And this is a very often quoted, this is something you were alluding to or referring to. Those who labor in the earth are the chosen people of God, if ever he had a chosen people, whose breast he has made his particular deposit for substantial and genuine virtue. It is the focus in which he keeps alive the sacred fire which otherwise might escape from the face of the earth. Corruption of morals in the mass of cultivators is a phenomenon of which no age nor nation has furnished an example. It is the mark set on those who, not looking up to heaven, to their own soil and industry, as does the husbandman for their subsistence, depend for it on the casualties and caprice of customers. Dependence begets subservience and venality, corruption, in other words, suffocates the germ of virtue and prepares fit tools for the designs of ambition. Stop here for a second. He's saying farmers are independent. When I manufacture, I am beholden or dependent upon a market. If I, let me see what I have here. If I want to market my beard manager, right? Clever tool that it is, there has to be a demand for it, or I must create a demand or something like that. And, right, so I am dependent upon my market. Whereas he says the husbandman is independent. Right? Now, that's not entirely true as well, because the husbandman, makes food for himself and he wants to bring food to the market and make money off that. So he's dependent upon a market as well. But that's Jefferson's argument. He says this natural progress and consequence of the arts has sometimes perhaps been retarded by accidental circumstances. But generally speaking, and here's another principle, the proportion which the aggregate of the other classes of citizens bears in any state to that of its husbandmen is the proportion of its unsound to its healthy parts, and is a good barometer whereby we measure its degree of corruption. So if you want to know if a nation is virtuous, see how many people are farmers. If more people are farmers than not, you can say it's more virtuous than corrupt, right? He said, while we have land to labor, then let us never wish to see our citizens occupied on a workbench or twirling a distaff. Carpenters, masons, smith are wanting in husbandry, but for the general operations of manufacture, let our workshops remain in Europe. Right? And he says the mobs of, I'm skipping ahead, the mobs of great cities add just so much to the support of pure government as swords do to the strength of human body. It is the manners and spirit of a people which preserve a republic in vigor. A degeneracy in these is a canker which soon eats to the heart of its laws and constitution. So enough of that. What he's getting at is, for the first time, I want to say first time, but the cities are exploding populationally. And London is many hundreds of thousands at the time. I think Paris is 500,000 or so. I'm not sure. There are many hundreds of thousands in London. And the large cities are. And if you read, let me find books. Francis Bacon's Utopia. Francis, the utopian literature of the day. Francis Bacon writes prior to Jefferson. He's an earlier, not a contemporary Jefferson, comes prior. Talks about the utopia for people, and farming is the most important thing for people. We got a word from utopia from Francis Bacon, and Mercier writes in his memoirs of the year 2420. This says 2050. The translator just took 2440 and made it 2450 for reasons unbeknownst to me that escaped my acumen. But the idea here, again, he's talking about an ideal Paris. Mercier writes that, talks of a man who falls asleep, then he wakes up many centuries later and he finds himself in Paris in the year 2440, and everything is perfect. The Paris that he left, he says, was a head 3 times the size of the body. In other words, Paris was a city swelled out of proportion to France. So the idea is, as the cities are becoming big and important hubs of manufacture, there's a sort of rebellion against city living. Right? Okay, why do you want to live in cities? Because there's pollution, there's plague. Remember yellow fever in Philadelphia, right around 1790s, late 90s, 1800 something. And people are starting to realize that for all the presumed perceived benefits of cities, there are numerous drawbacks, and there's a sort of yearning to get back to the bucolic, the countryside sort of life. So, you get in all the utopian literature, Condorcet writes a book, Utopian in Structure. Some other British scholars write Utopian. All the books talk about farming as the ideal. More says, in some sense, every person who lives in utopia has to spend at least half their time engaged in farming before they go into the work in utopia, in the urban part of this utopia, and do whatever work they do there. So farming is manufacture is mephitic. It's poisonous. It's because we're, look at Charles Dickens' Scrooge. You've seen the movie.
Mm-hmm.
All these people crowded in small spaces, and pollution, and children and women working. And it's a sickly environment, right? And it really is. And then top that off, Jefferson says, most of the stuff that's manufactured is complete garbage. Look at what we manufacture today. Look at my sunflower headband and my sunflower t-shirt. Do I need these things for the show?
And beard manager, you need the beard manager. I
need the beard, absolutely. But the idea is, you can, I love sunflowers, so I bought this and this. And do I need it? Was it expensive? No, I can't afford to buy expensive stuff, in spite of all the wealth I draw in from the royalties from the show. But anyways, and you. But do we need? No, so we buy stupid things.
Right.
And Jefferson is really averse to that. So, I mean,
well, yeah, that's
it
why
it resonates today, doesn't it?
It sure does. It's so funny because even though his writings and he lived so long ago, it's still relevant today. That's why when I hear people say, "Oh, that's an old document," or "That's old," or It's like, oh my gosh, if you actually read it and understood it, you'd realize it's as if he's alive today, writing about today's
Well,
society. You
I
would see
had
the parallels.
a student when I was in my teaching days, some years back, and this was like 2010s, talking about, oh, talk to another student about, did you see this old movie? He goes, no, what is it? Throughout the titles, goes, yeah, it was 1988. And here I am, I'm a movie buff, and I just watched a 1920s movie, which was pretty bad, on Daniel Boone. But I like watching silent movies as well as really old movies just to see how the movies of, if I want to know how the movies of the 40s came about, I need to watch the movies in the 30s and the movies in the 20s, and the before talkies, you have to see silence and silent movies. So I'm sort of a historian in my own way of thinking of movies. I like to watch movies and study them in some sense, enjoy them that way. I don't know if you are.
Well, I have this in honor of Thomas Jefferson.
What are those, yams?
It is, or that, or sweet potatoes.
Oh, really?
So, with Americans fully engaged in husbandry, would not such a full engagement put us at an economic disadvantage in trading with other nations?
Sure. But, I think Jefferson's answer would be, it's a good question. Who cares?
Well, we would need, right. That's true. That's
No,
true.
I'm just saying, is America going to be thriving economically as robustly as Paris? I mean, as France or England? No, but he doesn't want that. He wants
Right.
He wants us to be on our side of the Atlantic, to be self-sufficient, to be growing our own food, to be trading for things that we need, ideally, not gewgaws, not fripperies, not things that we don't need, except for this important beard manager, but things that we really do need. We need a new plow blade. We need we need hose. We need
you need lots of hose.
Yes, we need wood for building and stones and things and nails, and let's manufacture the sort of stuff that really is life enhancing, not life mephitic.
Right.
Whatever mephitic means.
Right. Whatever you say.
Whatever it means. I don't know. I like the sound of the word, though. It's mephitic.
Well, with so much ink spent on the virtues of farming, one expects that Thomas Jefferson, instead of being a lawyer or a politician, would have contented himself with being a planter. So why did he not remain a farmer?
Well, teacher Donna, notice the Colonel Holowchak at the lower
yes,
left
Colonel
there.
Holowchak. I like Farmer Holowchak, but okay.
Well, you could Colonel Farmer Holowchak. I mean, I could be a farmer, but I'm a planter. I'm on my plantation in Flint, Michigan, with all the wonderful water, and I have a plot of land where I'm growing my beets, my onions, and other sorts of things that I need. My carrots and tomatoes. It's about a 12 by 12 plot of land, right? So that qualifies me for a plantation owner as a planter.
Oh, wow.
And because I have a 12 by 12 plot of land, I deserve to be, and I lived in the South for 8 years, I deserve to be a colonel, don't it? Anyways, what was the question? I mean, I just danced all around.
I know. So why
wasn't he a farmer?
Farmer, if he thought so highly of farming and it was the only virtuous occupation, why wasn't he a farmer?
Why do you think? Let me see what you have to say on that. I think the answer is relatively easy. Maybe it's not that obvious, but
well, I'm thinking there has to be someone to run the political part of the that has to contribute to the running of the country. So
yeah, that's the main reason. Look, we're in a revolution.
He was better at that than as a farmer.
Yes, he was much better. Yeah,
so we just need, the moral of the story is we need politicians and farmers.
No, especially during the revolution. He wasn't especially, in spite of what he says about the virtues, he wasn't especially attracted to the farmer's lifestyle. I think he liked farming on paper.
Okay.
Remember, he was a mathematician. He liked he would work things out on how to plot out his lands and divide up his lands, what to grow where, how to rotate the crops on paper. And he would work things out on paper. And as I say a number of times in publications, whenever he worked things out on paper, he expected them to work out in reality, if it worked out theoretically.
Yeah.
And that's silly, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, I just think, he's look, I said when Dave was doing the show, I think I mentioned the Dave, Jefferson was a highly, inordinately brilliant man. And they're only, a man like him's not going to be happy being a farmer, for God's sakes.
Right.
He's brilliant. Are you going to be happy sitting there and, plotting out your crops and this and taking it to market? And then, well, I'm not going to grow corn next year. So what am I going to grow? That was boring to him.
I would love, oh my gosh, I would love that. I wish I knew how to garden. I would have a garden in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, we're not talking about a garden. We're talking about a plantation,
Yeah.
With tons of acres,
Yeah.
and then trying to figure out what to farm, in the stubborn, in the hills, in the rocky and in red clay soil. Yeah, so you answered the question the right way. The Times demanded his intelligence as a politician. That's one of the reasons why he left law. There was a revolution, and there's only so much you can do during times of revolution as a lawyer. And if the Continental Congress needed him, and eventually they did, that's what he would be doing.
Oh my goodness, this leads into, but I know we have one more thing, but I was wondering if his feelings on farming had anything contributed to his feelings on Shays' Rebellion.
Yeah, they did. That's a separate topic. Are you hinting at because the majority of people rebelling were farmers?
Yeah.
That there's no question that's a good question. There's without question, he was sort of attracted to Shay and the other people because there's a sense of justice. They weren't paid for what they were owed, and because they were farmers too, I think that made a difference for him.
Right. Wow. So see how relevant his personal life and the things he values play into getting to know him as a politician. You can't get to know him as a politician unless you know his private life, unless you know
his mind. This is why you have to read Panorama of Paris, why you have to read Land 2440, why you have to read Utopia. These are all
I'm going to come and stay with you for a week so I can read all your books.
Well, you're not going to be able to read anything in a week. You get through one book, you'll be lucky. It takes a while to read a book. And Lord Kames here, Lord Kames had this remarkable book. Can I get that anywhere? No, it's not coming in, is it? There it is.
Oh, there it is.
The Gentleman Farmer. How to apply, looking at theoretical aspects of farming as well as the praxis of farming. And that was a must read for it because he was, great philosopher of the time. And people do not understand just how influential Kames was on Jefferson's thinking. They have to read Kames, moral sense theory stuff and Kames on the aesthetic sense to understand Thomas Jefferson. But Kames probably had, like Francis Hutcheson, tremendous influence on the formation of Jefferson's thinking. And very few people even talk about those two people when it comes to Jefferson. Good question.
Yeah, it's kind of a cheap overview. You really, that's what I love about your work is you really dive into the meat and potatoes of the guts of everything. You're not
right, but you have to do that.
You're not skimming the top just to get fluff to throw out to the people.
Farming's a good analogy too for scholarship. Good scholar has to be a good farmer because you have to know this. Farmer can come and look at the soil and tell what kind of soil is, what can grow in it, and so forth, and get a sense of the climate and know all these things. And Jefferson wanted to be that way. Was he perfectly like that? No, because he was too far away from his lands. But you know, good scholarship is like that. You've got to do the dirty work. You've got to pull out, you've got to grub the soil. You got to get the roots and the weeds out of your garden, right? You got to pull the stones out. No one wants to do that.
Right.
And if you don't do that as a scholar, you're not going to be a good scholar, because that's what good scholarship is. I had someone reject one of my books. I'll say this quickly because I know, what, 4 minutes. Saying that, you know, it's very interesting. This person, you know, Colonel Holowchak clearly knows a lot about Jefferson, yet there's too much detail, and I don't think our readers would like that. And I just laughed at that. I know who wrote that, by the way, because good scholarship is detail. If you're not going to go into detail, you're writing crap. And if you're going to write stuff on the surface, you know, Jefferson slept with Sally Hemings because he liked, you know, dark-skinned women or something, and he had sex with many other slaves, maybe had sex with guys and animals. Yeah, you're going to get published and sell a lot of books, but you're not doing any dirty work, and you're not doing any real scholarship.
Yeah,
I can't do stuff like that.
So before we run out of time, the drum roll. The big question, was Thomas Jefferson a good farmer?
No.
Oh.
He was too far away from his fields to get to know them intimately. Like I said, he worked on his farm on paper.
Yeah.
For the most part. And when he came back from his political stints, his fields were too screwed up because the overseers weren't doing a good enough job. That's how I'd answer that question. He was a brilliant farmer when it came to theoretical aspects, to reading, you know, Lord Kames, The Gentleman Farmer, right? And stuff like that. But when it came to getting to know intimately his own soil, he never spent the time to do that. And I don't think he was interested in it by inclination. If you're a brilliant man, as he was, you're attracted to the most interesting problems in the world. That's what always attracted me, philosophy, is that it doesn't necessarily pay well, but you tackle the really meaty questions, the largest questions that existentially move people. You know, why is there evil? If there is such a thing as evil, does God exist? And what is real? How can there be knowledge? What is beauty? Jefferson was sort of like that. He was attracted to questions like that, even though he claimed not to be a philosopher. But he wanted to know what motivated people, what moved people. And he could not have been happy being a farmer. Okay, so he's a bad farmer, and other people who came to visit him noticed that.
Yeah.
Now, next week, you suggested a topic I sort of liked, and what was that? I'll see if
I don't remember.
You talked about books, it's libraries. Remember Thomas Jefferson libraries and books?
Oh, yeah. I can't remember exactly what, though. I forget.
But I thought it'd be nice to do, you know, maybe we'll do 1 word 5 questions. We'll look at a specific letter, but we can just look at his bibliophilia, his love of books. And my goodness, I share that today.
Cicero, though, that's what it was. He had more books written by Cicero than any other philosopher.
I don't know. I don't even know if that's true, by the way. That could be true, but Cicero was such an important thinker. I avoided him as an ancient scholar for years. And when I got to reading Cicero, I realized Jefferson really read and